I was 22 when this happened, back in the winter of 2017. I had just moved to upstate New York for work, and money was tight. So instead of flying home for Christmas, I rented a small cabin on the edge of a quiet town to spend the holidays. Alone. It was supposed to be peaceful, just me, a stack of books, and the calm of the snow-covered woods. The cabin itself was old but cozy, tucked far enough from the main road that the only sounds were the crunch of snow under my boots and the distant howl of the wind. By the second night, a heavy snowstorm rolled in, covering everything in thick, blinding white. The isolation hit me harder than I thought it would. I kept reminding myself that it was fine, that people rented cabins out here all the time. But there was something off about this place. From the first night, I had this strange, unsettled feeling, like the cabin wasn't as empty as it looked. The snowstorm grew worse overnight, and by morning the windows were frosted over, blurring the outside world into shifting white shadows. Inside the cabin it was silent, almost too silent. At first, I brushed it off as just a storm making me uneasy, but then little things started catching my attention. The first oddity was the back door. I was sure I had locked it when I went to bed, but when I checked in the morning, it was slightly ajar, letting in a thin drift of snow. I told myself I must have been careless, though I couldn't shake the image of someone opening it while I slept. Later that day, while I was making coffee, I thought I heard faint movement above me. A slow creak, like weight shifting on the floorboards upstairs. The thing was the cabin. Didn't even have a second story, just a low attic space you couldn't stand up in. I stood, frozen, listening, but the sound stopped as suddenly as it had started. That night, I laid in bed listening to the storm beat against the walls. Just before drifting off, I heard it again, soft, deliberate footsteps moving across the ceiling. My breath caught in my throat. The rational part of me tried to explain it away. Maybe ice cracking, maybe branches scraping in the wind. But deep down, I knew it wasn't the storm. I kept glancing at the dark corners of the cabin, convinced that if I looked long enough, I'd see someone standing there. The following day, the storm was relentless. The roads were buried, the power flickered, in and out, and I realized I was completely snowed in. The weight of the isolation really started pressing down on me. I tried distracting myself with my phone and some old DVDs I'd brought, but no matter what I did, I couldn't shake that crawling feeling of being watched. That evening, I stepped outside to grab some more firewood. The air was razor sharp against my skin, and the snow was up to my knees. As I trudged back toward the cabin, I noticed something in the snow near the back door. Footprints. Not mine. They were bigger, heavier, and they led straight up to the door, but none went back the other way. My stomach dropped. I looked around, heart pounding, but all I could see was a wall of swirling white. No movement, no sound but the howl of the wind. I rushed inside, locked the door, and shoved a chair under the handle. That night I barely slept. I kept hearing things, little knocks, soft dragging sounds, the faintest whisper of movement outside the walls. At one point, I swear I heard the doorknob to the front door rattle, like someone was testing it. My chest tightened as I stared at the door from the couch, firelight flickering across the wood. After what felt like forever, the sound stopped, and I was left in silence again. I tried convincing myself I was imagining it, that it was just the storm playing tricks. But then, in the middle of the night, I woke up to the sound of my bedroom window creaking. The latch was sliding open. I froze, barely daring to breathe. Slowly, the window pushed up an inch, letting in a gust of icy air. I couldn't see anyone through the gap, but I knew, without a doubt, someone was on the other side. The second I saw that window lift, instinct took over. I shot out of bed, slammed it shut, and locked it again with shaking hands. My breath was clouding and the cold air rushing in, and for a split second, I swore I saw the outline of fingers curl away from the frame, before disappearing into the dark. I staggered back, my heart hammering so hard it felt like it might burst. Whoever it was hadn't just been outside. They had been right there, inches from me. The silence after was almost worse than the sound itself. I stood in the middle of the cabin, listening, straining for any hint of where they might be. Then it came, slow, crunching footsteps circling the cabin outside. The snow muffled them, but I could hear the deliberate pace, moving from one wall to the next. I grabbed the fireplace poker and stood by the door, every muscle tight. The footsteps stopped near the back door, the one I'd found ajar the morning before. The handle jiggled, lightly at first, then harder, until the whole door shook against the chair I'd wedged under it. My chest was tight, my throat dry. I wanted to scream, but the sound lodged in my throat. The chair legs scraped, bending under the pressure. Whoever it was trying to force their way in. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the rattling stopped. Silence again. I didn't dare move. Minutes dragged by like hours. When I finally worked up the courage to peek through the frosted front window, all I saw was white, just endless snow, but pressed faintly against the glass, so light it could have been mist if I hadn't been. Inches away was a handprint. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I sat in the middle of the cabin with the poker in my hands, fire dying low, every shadow on the wall looking like it was moving. By morning, the storm had finally slowed, and the plows came through just enough for me to pack my car and get out of there. I didn't even look back as I pulled away. My hands were still shaking on the steering wheel, and the whole drive I kept checking the rearview mirror, half expecting to see someone following me down the snowy road. Later, when I reported it to the rental owner, they swore no one else lived within miles of that cabin. They chalked it up to the weather and my imagination. But I know what I saw. I know what I heard. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind is howling outside my own window, I can almost hear those footsteps circling again. I was 19 when this happened, in the middle of my first year of college. Winter break had just started, and instead of going home right away, I decided to drive to visit a friend who lived in Vermont. The only problem was the timing. A massive snowstorm hit the night I left, but I figured I could handle it. I'd grown up in the Northeast, and driving in bad weather didn't scare me, at least not at first. The trip should have taken about 3 hours, but the storm slowed me down to a crawl. By the second hour, I was on a back road surrounded by nothing but trees, no other headlights in sight. The snow was coming down, so thick my high beams barely cut through it. It was one of those moments where you realize just how alone you are. And then, out of nowhere, I noticed something strange on the side of the road. At first, I thought it was just a trick of the snow. A dark shape half buried in the drift at the side of the road. I slowed down, squinting through the windshield, and that's when I realized it looked like a car. The roof was just barely sticking out above the snow, and the windshield was frosted over completely. I pulled over, figuring someone must have gotten stuck during the storm. My first instinct was to check if anyone was inside, but as soon as I opened my door, the wind nearly knocked me off my feet. The cold was brutal, cutting straight through my jacket. I trudged over to the half-buried car, crunching through knee-deep snow, my phone flashlight shaking in my hand. That's when I noticed footprints. They led away from the driver's side door and disappeared into the woods. They were fresh, not filled in by the falling snow yet, which meant someone had walked into those trees not long before I arrived. I shined my light through the driver's window. The car was empty, no bags, no phone, nothing. Just an engine that looked like it hadn't been running in hours. My stomach twisted. Whoever it was, they had abandoned their car in the middle of a snowstorm and walked off into the forest. I stood there for a minute, my light fixed on those disappearing footprints, debating what to do. The woods were pitch black beyond the beam, and the storm made it impossible to hear anything except the wind. For reasons I still can't explain, I suddenly felt watched. Like if I kept staring too long, something in the trees would stare back. I hurried back into my car, heart racing, and tried to convince myself it was nothing, just some stranded driver who'd gone looking for help. But as I pulled back onto the road, I couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been standing at the tree line waiting. The snow only got worse as I kept driving. My wipers struggled to keep the windshield clear, and every mile felt like 10. But no matter how much I tried to focus on the road, I couldn't get those footprints out of my mind. Why would anyone head into the woods during a storm like this? About 20 minutes later, my stomach dropped. Up ahead, through the wall of snow, I saw movement. At first, I thought it was an animal crossing the road, but when I got closer, my headlights lit up a figure standing right at the edge of the trees. They weren't moving, just standing there, half turned toward the road. I slammed on the brakes, the car skidding slightly on the ice. By the time I came to a stop, the figure was gone. I sat there in the silence, engine humming, snow hammering against the roof, trying to tell myself I hadn't actually seen someone. But the feeling only grew worse the further I went. The road twisted through endless woods, and the snow made everything look the same. Every now and then, I caught what looked like shapes moving between the trees, but whenever I blinked, they were gone. Then, out of nowhere, my headlights cut across something that made my blood run cold. More footprints. Not just one set, but several, crisscrossing the road and vanishing into the woods on both sides. They looked recent, sharp-edged in the snow. I told myself it had to be hunters, or maybe locals, but it didn't make sense. Who would be out here in the middle of a blizzard? I tightened my grip on the wheel and pressed harder on the gas. That's when I noticed a sound. Over the howl of the storm, there was something faint, almost like a voice. At first, I thought it was coming from my radio, but when I turned it off, it was still there. A low, broken cry, like someone calling for help. I slowed down instinctively, but as soon as I did, the voice stopped. The road ahead was empty, white snow whipping in every direction. My skin prickled with unease. I didn't know if the storm was playing tricks on me, or if someone was actually out there. And then, as my headlights swept across the woods again, I saw it. Someone standing between the trees, closer this time, head tilted slightly as if they were watching me. I hit the gas without thinking, my tires spinning before they caught traction. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it over the storm. That figure between the trees, it hadn't been a trick of the snow. I knew what I saw, but the faster I drove, the more the storm seemed to work against me. The snow blinded me. The road felt narrower, and I kept losing control of the wheel. Then, out of nowhere, something slammed against the back of my car. A loud, heavy thud that shook me in my seat. I screamed and jerked the wheel, nearly sliding off the road. I checked the rearview mirror, but all I could see was white. My breath fogged up the glass, and for a second, I swear I saw a shadow moving just behind the car, like someone was running after me. I floored it. My engine roared, the tires fishtailing on the ice, but I didn't dare stop. Every nerve in my body was screaming at me to keep going. Another sound came then, something scraping along the side of the car. Metal against metal, nails against glass. I didn't care if I hit a ditch at that point. I just pressed harder on the accelerator, my headlights bouncing across the endless snow-covered road. Finally, the road curved, and I saw the faint glow of a gas station in the distance. It looked like salvation. I tore into the parking lot, slammed the car into park, and stumbled out, my legs barely holding me up. But when I turned back to look at my car, there were no footprints in the snow leading up to it. No dents, no scratches, nothing. Just my car sitting there, covered in fresh snow, as if nothing had ever touched it. I stumbled into the gas station, looking like I'd just escaped a wreck. The guy behind the counter asked if I was okay, and I told him someone had been chasing me out on the highway. He gave me this confused look and said nobody lived out that way for miles. No houses, no cabins, just forest. I went back outside after a few minutes, forcing myself to look at my car again. Snow was piling higher against the tires, covering any sign of what I'd just gone through. I checked the sides and back, expecting dents or scratches, but there was nothing. Just smooth, untouched metal under a fresh layer of white. I drove the rest of the way with my hands shaking on the wheel, half expecting to see that shadow waiting for me around every curve. And the worst part, I never saw any reports about a stranded car on that road. It was like it had never been there at all. To this day, I don't know if what chased me was a person or something else that hides in the snow. This happened 2 winters ago, when I was 26. I'd rented a small cabin in upstate New York for a weekend getaway. I live in the city, and I'd been feeling completely burned out, Too much work, too much noise, too many people. The idea of a quiet cabin surrounded by snow sounded perfect. The cabin was simple, just a single bedroom, a small kitchen, and a wood stove for heat. It sat at the end of a long, unplowed road that wound through thick forest. The owner warned me that if the snow got bad, I might be stuck there for a while. At the time, I laughed it off. I thought it would make the whole experience more authentic. The first night was peaceful. I cooked dinner, watched the snow fall through the big living room window, and felt like I'd finally found the escape I was looking for. But by the second night, as the storm worsened, I started to get the feeling I wasn't as alone as I thought. The storm picked up hard the next day. Heavy wind rattled the windows, and the snow outside piled, so high it nearly reached the bottom of the glass. I kept telling myself it was all part of the charm. I lit the wood stove, made some coffee, and tried to relax. But as the evening dragged on, little things started to feel off. Around 7, I heard what sounded like a knock, faint and muffled, like someone tapping on the side of the cabin. I froze, listening, but when I peered outside, all I saw was white. Snow, trees, nothing else. Later, when I went into the kitchen, I noticed the back door wasn't fully latched. I was positive I had locked it earlier. I tried convincing myself it was the wind, but it left this uneasy pit in my stomach. I decided to distract myself with a book. Curling up on the couch near the stove, the flames flickered, casting strange shadows across the walls. Every so often, I caught myself glancing toward the window, half expecting to see a face staring back. Then, around midnight, I heard footsteps. Not inside, outside. Slow, crunching steps moving through the snow, circling the cabin. My heart started racing. I killed the lamp and sat in the dark, straining to listen. The steps stopped, but the silence that followed was even worse. I told myself it had to be an animal. A deer, maybe. But deep down, I didn't believe it. I sat frozen on that couch for what felt like hours, staring at the dying glow of the stove. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind against the cabin walls, made my stomach tighten. But I couldn't shake the sound of those footsteps. They hadn't been random. They were deliberate, measured. Someone had walked slowly around the cabin, like they were looking for a way in. Finally, I forced myself to get up and check. I grabbed the flashlight I'd packed and went to the window. At first, all I saw was a swirl of snow whipping across the glass. Then my light caught something in the drifts below. Footprints. Human footprints, clear as day, circling the cabin before trailing off into the woods. My first thought was that maybe a hiker had gotten stranded, but the prints didn't lead to the front door. They didn't lead to the back either. They just circled, watching. I double-checked the locks, jamming a chair under the back door handle just in case. By then, my nerves were shot. I tried calling the cabin's owner, but the service was gone. Not even a single bar. I kept pacing, glancing at the window every few minutes. At one point, I swore I saw something move out there, a shadow breaking the white, gone as soon as I focused on it. Then came the sound again. This time, it wasn't footsteps in the snow. It was a slow drag, like something being pulled. I pressed my ear to the cold glass, heart pounding, and I swear I heard a low, muffled breathing just beyond the wall. I snapped the flashlight back toward the snow, but nothing was there. Just my own reflection staring back at me, pale and terrified. I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I'd hear something, a knock, a scrape, that steady crunch of snow being disturbed. Whoever, or whatever, was out there wasn't going away. Sometime after 3 in the morning, I finally dozed off on the couch with the flashlight still in my hand. The fire had burned low, leaving the room in a dim orange haze. That's when I woke up to the unmistakable sound of the back door rattling. Not just the wind this time. Someone was pulling on it. I sat up, holding my breath. The chair I had wedged under the handle shook violently as the door jerked back and forth, the wood groaning with every tug. I fumbled for my phone again, still no service. My throat went dry as I realized how far out I was, completely cut off, with nothing but a flimsy lock and a wooden chair between me and whoever was outside. The rattling stopped. For a long, awful minute, there was silence. I thought maybe they'd gone, until I heard slow footsteps crunching around to the front of the cabin. I crept toward the window, trying to peek without being seen. That's when I saw it. A tall figure standing just beyond the glow of my porch light. They weren't moving. They were just watching. Even through the storm, I could make out the outline of a hood pulled low over their face, arms hanging unnaturally still at their sides. Then, without warning, they stepped forward, pressing a hand against the window. The glass fogged slightly under their touch. I stumbled back, nearly dropping the flashlight. The figure didn't try to break in, didn't speak. They just stood there, palm flat against the window, like they were letting me know they could get in whenever they wanted. I snapped. I grabbed the fire poker from beside the stove, ran to the back, and yanked the door open, screaming into the storm. But when I turned back toward the front window, the figure was gone. I didn't sleep for the rest of that night. I sat in the middle of the cabin with the fire poker in my hands, every shadow twisting into something sinister. I kept waiting for the sound of footsteps again, for the hand at the glass, but nothing came. When morning finally broke, I cautiously opened the door. The snow outside was deep, untouched, except for a set of footprints that circled the cabin and led back into the trees. They weren't mine. I packed my things in under 10 minutes, tossing them into the car without even caring if I left stuff behind. The roads were barely passable, but I didn't care. I just needed to get out. I never reported it. I couldn't even explain it properly to myself. To this day, I don't know who or what stood outside that cabin. But sometimes, on cold nights, I still see that hand pressed against the glass when I close my eyes.